and how sports have also been a place of anti-racism activism. We hope that this will provide us with an overview of how systemic oppression and the unequal distribution of power operates to create and perpetuate structures of racial inequality. As a reminder, a prerequisite for attending this session and for engaging in anti-racism work is an understanding of one's own position in a racist society and using your privilege to challenge racism wherever you experience it, in society, on the court or field, in your home, classroom, at work, and within yourself. This acknowledgement of self-awareness and commitment is integral in being able to use your dominant identity to center and uplift marginalized voices as equitable partners in disrupting oppressive systems of inequality wherever present. So I thank everyone in attendance for committing to that fight. In an effort to frame our discussion first, I will introduce each speaker, then I will present a series of carefully curated questions to be answered by each panelist, who will then engage in discussion based on submitted questions. Once we have exhausted those questions, time permitting, we will transition to the question and answer portion of the panel. As attendees, you all had the opportunity to submit questions for our panelists in your registration form. However, you can also send questions privately through the chat feature to our lovely host, Dr. T, if you can raise your hand, from the Center of Diversity and Inclusion, and Dr. Liebrick from the Department of Sociology and Anthropology. After tonight's panel, there will be a Lighting the Way for Brianna candlelight visual sponsored by the Black Student Alliance, Wofford Men of Color, Amnesty International, and the Wofford Women of Color, beginning at 8 p.m. in front of Olin. In place of breakout rooms tonight, we instead ask for those who are available to participate and stand in solidarity with these student organizations as they collectively seek to remember and honor those lost to police violence. A special thank you to Dean Taif Alexander for her expertise in helping initiate these teach-ins and drafting this script. Before we get started, I'd like to read a statement that our Wofford Student Athlete Advisory Committee wrote. On behalf of SAAC, our Social Justice Committee, we would like to address the problems we have in society today that have created a systemic racial divide. Our goal is to support our Black student athlete community through current issues like police brutality and social injustice. This is not an easy topic to discuss. As a collective athletic community, we need to do more in educating and learning about various racial issues, and it starts with the conversation. There is a lot to be done, and we as members of SAAC are doing everything we can to create a more inclusive and comfortable environment for our Black student athlete community. Now, let me introduce our panelists. Mr. Ronnie Clark is a native of Monroe, Louisiana, and currently a high school history teacher, basketball and football coach at Brookwood High School in Tuscaloosa. A former running back for the University of Alabama, Ronnie was ranked as the nation's #3 athlete by Rivals.com and #4 player in the state of Alabama in 2014. During his playing time at the University of Alabama, Ronnie was a member of the 2015-2017 National Championship team and a 4-time SEC champion. He is also the recipient of the Unsung Hero Award given by head coach Nick Saban and the coach staff, the Alabama Iron Man Award, and the Hometown Hero Award given by his teammates, and nominated for the 2017 Capital One Orange Bowl Football Writers of America Courage Award. Describing himself as a big sports guy, Ronnie shares that his main goal is to give back to the youth and others by sharing his experiences and lessons learned both personally and athletically by changing the narrative. Ronnie is currently completing his master's degree at the University of Alabama. Ms. Kelsey Nicole Nielsen is a leading broadcast journalist, public relations marketing specialist, and event host. As a freelance sports reporter and anchor, Kelsey has covered some of the top sporting events at local, state, and national levels, making a true mark on the sports industry, media industry. Even at a young age, Kelsey continues to grow her brand as a journalist and has become a well-known personality in the area. Kelsey was born and raised in a sports family, the daughter of an avid Gramblinite. Kelsey grew up in a world of Bayou classics and played a variety of sports growing up. She then went on to study broadcast journalism at the University of Maryland, College Park, and Georgetown University. Today, Kelsey works as a freelancer who has worked with SB Nation, NASCAR, SPN Radio, Fox Sports Radio, the Big East Digital Network, and so many more. Mr. Alvin Cno Jr., a 2013 Wofford alum, was born and raised in St. John Parish, Louisiana. Currently a mechanical engineer at Northrop Grumman with a master's degree in mechanical engineering from San Diego State University. He serves on the board of the National Society of Black Engineers while also being a traveling public speaker where he engages with various schools and programs. In his previous career, Alvin was an NFL linebacker with the LA Chargers, but now he serves as a fitness coach, helping numerous people on their fitness and nutritional journey, as well as a model and actor working on various promotional, commercial, and theatrical events. Alvin has gone from receiving over $2 million in scholarships, being inducted to his Collegiate Hall of Fame at Wofford College, and playing in the NFL, to now philanthropy, giving back towards various scholars and athletes. Lastly, but not leastly, we have Mr. J Mccauley, a Marietta, Georgia native, currently serves as the head men's basketball coach for Wofford College. As a student athlete, Coach Mccauley played 4 seasons at the University of Georgia and was on the 2018 that won the SEC tournament and served as the team's co-captain. After graduating with a degree in business education in 2006, he served as a graduate manager for 2 seasons and earned a master's degree in physical education. He coached at Gardner-Webb and Furman universities before coming to Wofford as our own head coach. Coach Mccauley and his wife, Sally, have 2 daughters, Addie and Charlie. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Now, to provide background on tonight's conversation, we're going to show a clip that inspired this title.
We're going to create a new banner. This is a Jum Doc alert. NBA superstar LeBron James is talking politics again.
I know you guys are excited to see her. I didn't know you guys were excited to see me too, but thank you. As much as you guys would love to hear from me, I would much rather love to hear from our next president, Ms. Hillary Clinton. Now, a historic moment. We cannot project the winner of the presidential race. CNN projects Donald Trump wins the presidency.
And this time it's R-rated. Here's his barely intelligible, not to mention ungrammatical take on President Trump in a new ESPN podcast.
The number one job in America, the point of person, is someone who doesn't understand the people and really don't give a about the people.
But wait, there's more gripping insight. ESPN host Carrie Champion asked James and fellow NBA star Kevin Durant about what she described as Trump's racist comments.
I feel like our team as a country is not ran by a great coach. It's not even a surprise when he says something. It's not even a surprise. It's like laughable. It's like,
it's laughable.
It's laughable and it's scary.
But it's also scary because I shouldn't be numb to your racist comments.
Right.
I shouldn't be numb to your behavior.
I'm numb to this commentary. Like, must they run their mouths like that? Unfortunately, a lot of kids and some adults take these ignorant comments seriously. Look, there might be a cautionary lesson in LeBron for kids. This is what happens when you attempt to leave high school a year early to join the NBA. And it's always unwise to seek political advice from someone who gets paid $100 million a year to bounce a ball. Oh, and LeBron and Kevin, you're great players, but no one voted for you. Millions elected Trump to be their coach. So keep the political commentary to yourself. Or as someone once said, shut up and dribble. We'll be right back.
Right.
I'm still trying.
Thank you for playing that, Dr. Liebrick. So this is leading us to our first question. As professionals in the sports world and athletes, can you reflect on your thoughts and feelings related to this clip and what it exemplifies about racism in sports and our society more broadly? Additionally, what message does this send to college athletes?
All right, I can go first to kick things off. Well, first off, thank you so much for having me here. It's an honor and pleasure to speak with you all. And, you know, watching this clip takes me back to just so many emotions. I remember when it first came out, and having covered sports for a good while now, it's a message that's commonly sent to our athletes, particularly when they're minority athletes. And it's crazy because for so long, so many people have said keep sports and politics separate, but when have they ever been separate? If you go back through history, sports have always been a way and a catalyst to influence the political realm. I mean, I'm in Washington, D.C. It's kind of hand in hand. And when this went out, I mean, it was beyond offensive because the thing is, she wanted to say shut up and dribble for Black athletes. You look at today, you have people like TikTok stars. I'm thinking like white TikTok stars. No one's telling them to just shut up and, you know, do these different social media memes and things like that. And then she tried to go on his academic and the way he talks, which is going with somebody's culture. There's a whole debate today about what Jeff Garcia said about Cam Newton, which is a whole nother debate. But saying all this to say, it's a narrative that commonly white political commentators, especially those in politics, don't want athletes to influence the culture, to influence the movement, because they know the reach of someone like a LeBron James. Think about LeBron James following. I mean, I don't think he tweets anything without it being thousands and thousands of retweets because he has so much influence. So many kids look up to him. In sports, this is why I cover sports. Sports for a long time has brought us all together. I mean, I've always loved covering sports because it's one of the only places you can go where you can be around people who have a different political background, a different religion, a different political party. But for those couple of hours, I mean, I worked for the Washington football team, and they just beat Dallas. It didn't matter what, you know, whatever background people were. We were all cheering, right? Because they finally won a game and were competitive in the NFC East and beat Dallas. And I think what it chose to shut up and dribble means just shut up and stick to sports. But you wouldn't tell that to anybody else. And none of us in our correct fields would want anybody to say that to us, because just because you play a sport, and she said pay him millions to just dribble a basketball, that man is extremely talented, worked hard to get to where he is if you followed his story. And you wouldn't say that to anybody else. So essentially, Black athletes are marginalized. People put them in these boxes. And I've been one to always talk about athletes using their platform for a purpose. That's what LeBron James is doing. Kevin Durant grew up here in PG County, right outside of DC. I mean, he's seen the political realm up close and personal. And if anything, they know their influence and their touch. And they, quite frankly, are Black males in America. I don't care what athlete you are. I don't care what you're wearing. Being a Black male in America is a different experience than anybody else in this country has. And they've all had experiences. And I know this from talking with athletes. I haven't talked to one Black athlete that hasn't had an unfortunate conversation or altercation with a police officer. I haven't talked to one Black athlete that hasn't feared for their life. But because they quote unquote have money, and because there's these stereotypes around sports, they're supposed to just be robots and do what society wants them to do. We love Michael Jordan, you know, when we were watching the docuseries this summer, but anytime he talks out politically, there's people saying, oh, well, why is he qualified to do this? Or why are they qualified to do that? And it's gone throughout history. Black people for a long time have been marginalized. I think we see it in sports, and it's because of the reach. And people are scared. When you have reach and you're a minority, they get scared. And that's what Laura Ingraham was perpetuating. It's this narrative of racism. You look at female athletes too, it's the same thing. You know, Jamel Hill is a prime example of what it is to face racism and sexism, and people not wanting you to talk out on your beliefs, even though she's a Black woman in America. And I know we'll talk on Breonna Taylor later. But I think what we saw was just a typical thing that athletes go through. We saw it this summer after the killing of George Floyd, when athletes tried to raise their voices and talk about activism, which has always been active in sports. I mean, you can go back to Muhammad Ali and some of the others. And of course, now with Colin Kaepernick and why he's still not playing today in the National Football League, it's always been there. And to me, why not use your platform, as LeBron James did, as Kevin Durant were doing, to influence change? But it's people like Laura Ingraham that have continually tried to hold us back and not to continue to perpetuate the narrative of advancing people of color forward. So I think that's a long way of saying it, but what Laura Ingraham embodied is what many athletes today have to face anytime they decide to speak up and speak out on matters that are wrong or matters that influence them.
Yeah, I mean, I would completely agree. When I saw this video, the first thing I thought about was the epitome of American hypocrisy. And me, I have an engineering background, so I'm anytime I analyze things, engineering just teaches, and sciences in general teaches a certain way to go about things. And for me, I always start off with the history. Where is she coming from when she say these things? And making the comment about hypocrisy, it is exemplified throughout history. I mean, from the very initial beginning, the 13 colonies, pilgrims and Protestants coming across the ocean, they came here seeking religious freedom, but then 100 years later, you end up with slaves. Hypocrisy. Or the founding of the United States of America, uh, freedom and justice for all men are created equal, but yet you have second-class citizens in, more than half of your country don't even have basic human rights. So, that is just shows from during that time to exactly in this time in 2020, the American hypocrisy that has been prevalent from the get-go and we're still dealing with today. I mean, what does this message send to college athletes? That you don't matter. You are here for one purpose and one purpose only, and that is to entertain me. I need you talking back. I don't need you trying to fight for rights. I don't need you trying to be equal to me, because I don't see you as equal to me. And just dealing with that dilemma, I mean, the fact that we're in 2020 and people still have that mindset is really upsetting, it's really frustrating, and it's mind-boggling that we haven't progressed past that point. I mean, you would think it's such a basic point. Like, I'm a human, you're a human, we both gonna respect each other for at least being a full human. And some people still struggle with that, even in society in general. A lot of systemic practices that still struggle with that concept. So it's it's upsetting, but I definitely think we're making progress. We have a whole lot more progress to go. So I'm glad that Wofford is being a part of the process, being a part of that solution in this world, and everyone gathered here together today to discuss different things, to be a part of that solution as well.
Ronnie?
Oh yes, kind of what I feel about what was said in the video, which is basically just making it seem like athletes was our voice means nothing. A mogul figure like LeBron James and Kevin Durant kind of bringing them down on their word and just pretty much saying that just shut up and dribble a basketball. Like, I don't think people really understand how much of effect, because I'm at the high school level, and I don't think people understand how much of effect that really comes up on when little kids see people, down in their idol, and it crushes them just more as it crushes the fans of LeBron James and Kevin Durant. And just me being a college athlete before, and knowing what we had to go through, during these times, like Alvin said, entertainment, we put a lot of work in for that entertainment for, people to see. So I don't think a lot of people understand what goes into that. And, just for our voice to be heard within, the politics of it, I think it's a real big deal for, athletes as a whole, and for those mogul figures like LeBron James and Kevin Durant to keep doing that. And, just to not, pretty much to not understand and care what she says, and keep, expressing their feelings and, expressing it for the athletes. So that's kind of what I think and took from that video.
Yeah, thanks everybody for having me a part of this panel discussion. And I'm humbled and honored to be a part of this. And I know a lot of our players and staff are logging on. We just ended practice, so if my voice is a little hoarse, we turned the ball over quite a bit today, so I apologize. But this is really special for me. And we've been doing a lot with our team, which we'll get into later in the discussion. But as it pertains to the anti-racism team and what they've done for our team over the summer, I just want to thank your crew for everything you guys have done for us and creating discussions like this that I think can really go a long way to creating a lot of meaningful change on campus as well as in our communities. And I'm not just talking about here at Wofford, I'm talking about where all of our players are from. And they all have experiences and things that they bring with them to college that they don't just leave at home, they bring it with them. And, I think as it relates to this clip particularly, it just shows how ignorant some people are and how numb a lot of people have become and the cycle it creates with the racism in our society. And I see it every day in terms of our players. How does that affect our players? Because they do watch NBA after they go to practice and hopefully study hall, right, gentlemen? But they do watch those things and they do hear those things on social media, and it does affect them, to Ronnie's point, to Kelsey's point, and to Alvin's point. But it does say to them, and it diminishes their value as far as their opinions and what they believe and feeling like they have a voice. And it also, I want to make this point, it also sheds in our locker room to our white players that, wow, people are saying this about our Black community and Black players like LeBron James. And maybe my Black teammates feel like that as well. Our white players, maybe subconsciously, because our society's creating that cycle, are thinking maybe their opinion doesn't matter either. And I'm not saying that for our locker room or anyone's locker room on campus, but that's where the problem just continues, I think. And ignorant and damaging statements like that she makes, I just think makes the problem even worse.
Thank you. So we're going to move on to our next question. Some people might say that the playing field is the great equalizer, that sports are neutral, and that watching a game is an escape from reality. However, we know that critical studies of sports point out that issues like racism and sexism show up and are even amplified on and off of the field. How would you respond to someone who says that there should be a separation between the athlete and social activism? For instance, those who have called out Colin Kaepernick or Ariana Smith, Muhammad Ali, Tommy Smith, John Carlos, in addition to LeBron James and many, many others, for being too political.
I guess I can start first again. I'll be, since I'm the only lady, I feel like I need to. I think, it's interesting, especially since I cover women's sports. It's funny when I hear the word equalizer, when women athletes are still fighting for the right to be paid equally for playing the same sport. You have someone like a Megan Rapinoe. Look at the WNBA. I mean, it's crazy, just the pay scale and the pay difference, even when you see the same talent, especially when you look at our women's national team, who have quite frankly been doing better than the men's team, still have to fight to get paid. And then even when they say an equalizer, when you look at race, think about how long it took sports to get integrated. I mean, an equalizer, I would say how. And even today, look at how athletes are treated differently based on, Black athletes are quite frankly judged more on their quote unquote athleticism and fight for respect. Like we've been talking about the year of the Black quarterback in the NFL. Lamar Jackson of the Baltimore Ravens just won MVP, and he's still fighting for respect as a quarterback. Black quarterbacks are judged very differently than their white quarterback counterparts. And so when I hear sports have been an equalizer, I'd say look throughout history. I mean, time and time again through all sports, you know, we're still fighting to diversify sports. Look what happened in NASCAR this summer with Bubba Wallace. I mean, especially as soon as people found out I worked for NASCAR, they had to find somebody African-American that worked for NASCAR that could speak on the issue. I mean, he was literally, and I don't care what anybody says, I saw a noose. And he had to fight to tell people what he saw was offensive and racist, and people decided to call him Jesse Smollett and many different other things. You know, you look at hockey, Black players. I mean, it was just last year we had Black players being thrown bananas on the ground in Canada, people calling them monkeys, an equalizer. And I mean, like I said, you can look through sports throughout history. And I would say I see nothing equal. And I think that's in terms of sex. And I think that's in terms of race. And I will say, of course, we have made strides. Yes, strides have been made, but I would not say it's equal, you know, through any sports. I mean, cover college basketball, covering a women's game at Georgetown is completely different than covering a men's game, and just what women have to go through. You know, you look at someone like Amaya Moore this summer and all the great work that she's done. You look at the WNBA, who for a long time has been calling for justice, quite frankly. You know, an equalizer, I mean, they still can't even get equal coverage. And so I think when you look at the word equal, I would challenge people to really look at what that means. And I think when people say equal, I think people like to make the debate, well, you know, now you have people coming, a lot of times, you know, we cover the athlete stories of quite frankly, people who come from not much to quote unquote making it. And that's what people like to call an equalizer. But you have to look at their story and look at the supports that they're given. I mean, you don't really get a second chance when you're a Black athlete, right? You make a mistake, it follows you the rest of your life. You look at somebody like a Michael Vick, who the dogfighting charges will never, ever be erased from his story. But, you know, you look at someone like a Baker Mayfield, who has had an interesting past, not the same thing, but, you know, it's, oh, he was just young, or, oh, he was just a college kid, right? So when I hear equalizer, again, I see what people are trying to say. And I think sports does have the power to hopefully one day be equal. I'd say the only equalness I see is maybe in terms of the fan base, in terms of anybody, if you have money, of course, can get to a game. And again, as I said earlier, you could be around people of just different backgrounds, right? Because that's what sports does. It brings us together to root for a team or to boo a team, right? Quite frankly. So I would challenge anybody for equal to show me where, how, and when throughout the history of sports, you know, have we seen that? Because again, Black athletes don't even get credit. Like, Black athletes started horse riding. I'm from Maryland, right? If you look at the history, horse jockeys started as Black athletes, but then of course they were forbidden to do that. And now you look at horse riding, challenge you to find me a Black horse jockey. I mean, so throughout history, you can go back and point to examples of the unequalness of sports, the Olympics, and even now just the different things that athletes of color have to face today. And I'd say even not just athletes in sports, coaches of color have to face today. Look at the Rooney Rule in the NFL. So there's many examples, but I will allow my other panelists to dive in on it.
Just equality in within sports. I mean, I'm playing, you know, all levels, high school, college, and professional. I'm gonna take just from a fan perspective, just separating the sport and social activism. I hear a lot of fans say, you know, they watch sports to relax, to get away from the problems, to get away from, you know, CNN and Fox and all the political news that's going on. But that is live sports. I think fans typically, they mistaken their favorite athlete as celebrities and think, oh, they're just bigger than life, to where they're not even considered human anymore. You know, you go to a game, you see LeBron James, and you think you're looking at the game as though you're watching TV. And now, you know, a lot of fans, they get rowdy, saying all kind of crazy things, but these are humans playing, you know, they have feelings just like you in the stands. And, you know, you say the wrong thing, you might get a wrong reaction, you know. And if you want to get away in that sense, you know, that's what movies are for. Go to the theme park, or, you know, do something of that sort. But sports are as intertwined, or is as intertwined in political progression as it's ever been. Like Kelsey said, throughout history, they have always been one and the same. So that will never be separated. And another thing, people say it's a political issue. You know, whether as if equality is equality liberal or conservative? Like I'm confused. That is neither, because equality is a human issue. I mean, all you have to do is be alive and breathing to care about equality and human issues. So there's no separation of sports and activism, because at the end of the day, we're all humans and we all should care about human equality.
Kind of going off based on what Alvin said, kind of took the words out of my mouth, what I was gonna say, but basically it's basically what he said. I think, the reality what people kind of get confused is that, I know they see the fame, they see the money, they see all the jury, and they see a lot of things, that a lot of athletes have. And I think that, like Alvin said, they get confused that, hey, we're just the same, we're just human people, we make mistakes as well. And the perception of athletes in general, I think of the Black athlete in general, is what kind of tries to make that separation, or people try to make that separation between the two. Because I think, a lot of the Black athletes, have a lot of impact on the youth. And I think, if we can continue to impact the youth and use these guys that are always on these platforms, as professional platforms, and don't get it confused from, the fame that they may show, the status that they may show, just people just get confused of the reality of it. And I think, just going back to what Alvin said, just understanding that, hey, we have feelings too, and that, we could, also come together with the equality of learning from one another by understanding and listening to what others saying, and, chiming in on what their conversation could be about.
Yeah, and I think Alvin makes a really good point here, and I agree with all the panelists that it's impossible to separate the two. But the hypocrisy that goes on with sport and racism and trying to separate the two, I can speak for my players in knowing that, again, they show up to a game, they're human beings with feelings, emotions, things going on. And the fans can't just see that as entertainment and think that they're just robots out there, Delusional, ignorant fans may think that, but our players are humans. And, I'll give you an example. A few years ago when we were ranked 17th in the country and a lot of people came to our games on the road, one of my Black players got called a racial slur as he made a corner three. And he looked back and almost physically left the floor to go confront that white man, older man. And luckily the referee stopped the game and, the people escorted that fan. But to see the pain when that kid came to our huddle and see what he was going through at that moment, where he was just playing basketball and got called a racial slur for making a corner 3-point basket in a college game. That's real stuff, ladies and gentlemen, that athletes are going through. So you can't separate what those kids are going through and want it both ways. And I think that's something that I've never been through. I'm not Black. And I think a lot of head coaches that are white have failed miserably in this past 6-7 months, is trying to politicize this issue. And instead of taking a backseat and trying to listen to their Black players and listen on things like this to learn and figure out ways to have meaningful discussions, they've made it political. And I just feel like as a white head coach, I have an obligation to not stand in front of my players and say, you got to do this, this, and this as it pertains to race. I don't know what that's like as a white man, as a head coach. My Black players have a lot of pain and experiences that they've been through. And again, giving them a platform to amplify that platform on a daily basis so that people don't think you can separate the two, I think is the most important thing.
Thank you, everyone. And thinking about Kelsey's idea around where's this great equalization or equalizer presence within these sports is like in the stands. But thinking about it structurally, how many owners of color are there in the NFL, in the NBA? Out of 32 teams, only 2 are people of color, and they're not Black, they're not African American. So there's something there about that discrepancy that needs to be addressed. Jay's point in regards to generational, you mentioned that this was an older adult who kind of made this racial slur. So let's address that. Racism is certainly not new in the United States, but in the past 5 years, and especially the past 6 months, there's been growing momentum around Black Lives Matter and Say Her Name, with activists calling on the nation to address systemic racism and violence at every level and in every institution. What are your thoughts on how national sports leagues, especially the NBA and NFL, have responded to anti-racism activism like Black Lives Matter? What are your thoughts on how college sports have responded? So you can start with the conversation around college sports. What are your thoughts around college sports and their response?
I guess I could start here. I think the intent for everyone trying to keep this conversation going is there, but I think a lot of people have tried and failed miserably. And, I'm not here to judge an organization, an NBA or whoever. I think the NBA tried to do the right thing, and it seems like that's fizzling out next year. But I can only speak to my situation here at Wofford, and I think it really has to start with your locker room. All right. Me as a head coach and how we do things in our locker room. How do I give a platform for our Black players and all of our players to voice their opinions and share their experiences? How do we gain the trust of everyone in that locker room so that we can go out on campus or in our athletic department and have a discussion to create change that we all want? Let's be honest. Everybody wants to make strides here and ultimately do good things in our community. And hopefully we can all be impacted to where when we graduate from Wofford, like the college experience is supposed to be, we're affecting our communities back home. And all of my players are great father-like figures that know right from wrong and can do the right things with their own families, just like I'm trying to do with my 2 daughters. So, I think, the NBA level, you got the players, you got the coaches, you got the owners. Well, if one of those links in the armor aren't representing this consistently, I don't think it's going to work. And you see that with the NBA, right? And other organizations. But that's where I think internally the players have just got to continue to have these discussions. The head coaches have got to support that. And then the coaches have to make sure that their organization understands how important these issues are. So working from the ground up would be what I'm most seeing.
I would say, what Coach Mccauley said, that is step one. Okay, on a collegiate level, NBA have a lot of slogans all over the court. NFL and other leagues probably they aren't doing as good as the NBA, but I mean, to be realistic, the NCAA or NFL, NBA, they're just a voice. It's going to take everybody to have the discussion. Okay, that's step one. But one question I always ask my family and anybody is, what are you doing? That's really what it comes down to. Okay, we put Black Lives Matter on the end zone. Okay, congratulations. Now what are you doing? Putting a slogan on a jersey or on the end zone or wherever is not changing anything. At the end of the day, we need change. That is the end result, the only result that will matter. It's a great start to that right now. However, I know like the NFL or NBA is doing, they have some donations that they're making towards like HBCUs or just different pro-Black causes to create equality. But there needs to be more, quite frankly. I mean, that's really the only way to put it. For me personally, I always challenge myself. How did I uplift somebody or create some type of positive impact in the world? I think there needs to be a plan of action. And like Coach Mccauley said, it starts from the top. So the commissioner of all these leagues, the commissioner of the NCAA in each specific conference, and then going on to the head coaches and our supporting staffs, and then all the players can follow suit. But there needs to be a plan of action, steps to create and get to the end goal of equality and some type of substantial change. Because, once again, we look at history, I'll always go back to history because it's the most straightforward way of getting an answer and learning what to do and what not to do. If we look back at history, this isn't the first civil rights movement in the world, in history. There's been plenty others before. And we have to look at what created that change. What happened to create some type of monumental and measurable change to get to the required or desired end goal. The 60s, there was a lot of chaos, basically, that happened to create that change. It wasn't just people who didn't just, go to the meeting room and just had an hour meeting for 6 months. Like, it was a lot of chaos and craziness and, quite frankly, violence going on to create that change. And obviously, I don't think anyone would want things to get to that point now, but as sooner or later, that is something that's required, or something that has been proven throughout history that is needed to create that change. So, for me, I would just say I would encourage everyone here to do your part in being that solution and creating that change.
Okay, so on one hand, we've got Jay saying it starts with the players. We've got Alvin, and I'm summarizing. We've got Alvin saying it starts within. Kelsey, where is the other place that this conversation should be starting?
I think both of them touched on it, but I do believe it needs to start with leadership. That's what leadership is, right? And I think especially at the college level, you have these young adults who are kind of trying to find themselves. That's what college is. And when I look at this whole situation, quite frankly, I honestly thought that a lot of college coaches struggled the most with this, right? Because on one end, you have scholarship athletes, you have student athletes. I talked to college athletes, that were quite frankly afraid to kind of go against, quote unquote, the coach. You look at someone like, Nick Saban, who had said all lives matter, including Black lives, where if you understand what the Black Lives Matter movement is, you wouldn't have added that in. You had coaches, honestly, quite frankly, afraid to say Black lives matter. You have this detachment. You have so many coaches that can coach these Black athletes in terms of sport. But I think when it got uncomfortable, and this was what bothered me, honestly, the most on the college level, why are you just now trying to figure out, where your athletes are coming from? Why are you just now asking them about their experiences with racism? This should be a common kind of thread. I mean, that's how a team gets closer. I think for me, being vulnerable when I played sports was one of the best things, when I had people that I could be vulnerable around and could cry on, but then the next day we could go on the court, and battle and be, your brother or your sister, wherever. And I think, when we see the professional ranks of it, quite frankly, the athletes, I think, got it right. If anything, I've been inspired by student athletes. I think student athletes have inspired their coaches to learn from them and lead. And this is what I think the next generation, I think it's what is most exciting about the next generation is how vocal they are. I think this is why social media can be good, because we've seen movements grow on social media. We've seen athletes not afraid to speak out. We've seen athletes, I mean, I'm kind of biased because I went to Maryland, but at Maryland, they had a whole conversation with Mike Locksley about what they wanted to do. And even though my team got beat bad, Maryland was embarrassing. They talked about, the words on the back of their jerseys. They talked about, their feelings. And quite frankly, it might have been, I don't want to say easier, but Mike Locksley is also an African-American coach, right? So he has a similar shared experience, but I also don't want that to be a distraction where you say, because I'm not your background, I can't understand what you're going through. We'll never fully understand, because to me, nothing beats lived experience, but you can have that conversation, and don't just have it when we have the death of George Floyd or when we see this unfair verdict for the Breonna Taylor case. Have this conversation year round, because being Black in America doesn't just, happen once in a while. We're Black our whole lives. That's the one thing that'll be always consistent for me, is that I was brought in a Black woman, and I'll be taken out of this world as a Black woman, right? I can change my name, right, if I get married or anything else, but I'm still me, and my experiences are still me. And I think Alvin touched on it. I mean, having slogans is nice. The NFL had it in the end zones, not quite as large as we saw it in the NBA. I think the WNBA honestly is where they kind of got it right. But again, women have kind of been on the forefront of this for a long time, but they don't get the same attention, until a man kind of co-signs it for them, or says the same thing, which is unfortunate. The NFL, I mean, we saw Roger Goodell have that that interview where he had that tearful apology and said, "We got it wrong." Well, Colin Kaepernick doesn't get to get those years back. You guys played sports. You understand. It's not the same. And then why did it take all of this to happen for you to realize that, when so many had been saying it for quite a while? Again, the jerseys are great. The slogans are great. The hashtag is great, but it's changed. I mean, I don't want it to just be a hashtag. It needs to be a movement in society. Again, being Black in America, it's an experience, and it depends, especially depending on where you live in this country. None of this is new to us, and it's bad that we've become so numb to this feeling. And I think for me, I would like to see it start in the collegiate ranks, because I think that kind of, you help your student athletes to grow when they get in the professional ranks. But I do think there's so much to learn. Honestly, I'm for youth voice. I'm for it starting with the youth who are kind of coming up in this new generational world that's different than how we grew up. And so I think it's a lot that we can learn from our student athletes, or even from our athletes on professional teams. I mean, you look at somebody like Coach Popovich, who I would say kind of always gets it right. Like, he kind of is understanding. And Steve Kerr in the NBA, who kind of gets it right. And I think that's the great thing about sports. When I talk to athletes who are not Black, who have played with Black athletes, they kind of are more understanding, because they've had conversations with their teammates. They've had, they've been to their teammates' houses, their homes, they kind of learn the culture and kind of swagger of their fellow teammates, which I think is kind of how we will kind of break through this together. I completely agree. It's going to take all of us together, but we also have to be willing to listen and learn and to let the young people lead. Because I think if anything, they're going to kind of be the power to breaking these stereotypical norms. It's kind of hard to change an older person, right? We all know, kind of like my grandmother, she's going to do things her way. There's only so many different things I can tell her how to do it, but she's going to be in her way, and that's completely fine, right? But my mom and dad, my dad just got an iPhone. He finally left the flip phone. It took time. It's a process, but it can happen. So I think, there's promise. I think that's why we're seeing a lot of the athletes starting the movement. And then coaches kind of came back and said, you know what? Wow. Like, this is something that I learned from just looking and learning and listening from my athletes, and seeing that they're more than athletes, seeing that they're human beings with thoughts and feelings who can change the world.
Yeah, and I think to Kelsey's point, I think there's a lot of people that are afraid what student athletes are going to say, and what you find out is they get a lot of good things to say from their experiences. And the last 6-7 months, I think giving them the platform to express that more and to come up with ideas, and I'm just speaking for my team, how to make change in our campus community, how to make change in our athletic department, how to make change in Spartanburg, and letting them decide is something that our staff has done. To read books with our players and about Malcolm X and have conversations about that. And I'm not here to toot our own horn and say we're doing things the right way, but these are things, to Kelsey's point, I think it's from the ground up of allowing your players to take action on this thing and to support them and amplify it. Me, being a white man, amplifying that as best I can, and not making them feel like they're going to be judged, and our campus not making them feel like they're going to be judged or threatened because of what they say, just because it's not in a cookie cutter political way. And I think if we have that idea and be willing to go out to lunch with one of my players and see the pain that they've been through at a random traffic stop back home, not here in Spartanburg, just back home, I think we would see it in a totally different light, and it's just willing to have those conversations and giving them the autonomy to make those decisions that I think is really powerful for change.
So Kelsey's point is leadership listening. That is an art form, right? So Ronnie, you're a high school football coach. I mean, these players are coming in from high school, kind of already worked into that systemic space, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, from the high school level, pretty much, just kind of building that relationship. Because the school that I'm at, I am at a predominantly white school. We have a few black kids that are there, but with me being there, it's giving me the opportunity, to kind of, relate and kind of what I went through injuries and through sports and stuff like that, and kind of relate to some of the players that I have and that I coach and stuff like that. I'm always about, trying to be the change and try to be the leader and try to set the example. I think that's more of what coaches try to do and what, older players and younger players try to do as well. I try to coach guys up and, teach guys as well. It doesn't matter, for you to be the older guy to kind of be that leader. You can start that as a young guy and, portray those same traits as those athletes that you kind of admire and stuff like that, or coaches. So, just from that level of aspect, just trying to get the kids to understand because they really don't know. And a lot of kids are born now, that I teach are born after 9/11, so they really don't even know about that. So when that part of September came up, we had to kind of go back and kind of revisit that situation so they can understand. So I think just with the young group and the young generation, just trying to get them to understand and to know kind of what's going on in this situation, because quite frankly, a lot of them really don't pay attention to what's really going on in this situation and what this movement and this cause is about. And so that's why I think, more people my age and, more people around the same frame that I am, try to keep spreading it to the younger generation, to your younger brothers and sisters, to your younger cousins. And that's what I try to do at the high school level.
So Ronnie, you're really doing a great job of leading us to the next area in regard to kind of empowering that or amplifying those voices. So as many of us in the Zoom meeting are at an institution that has NCAA Division I sports teams, what advice would you all give to administrators about athletes wishing to use their platforms as players to advocate for social justice and speak out against systemic oppression? How do we amplify and encourage those voices?
My main thing is pretty much, open your ears up and listen. Kind of listen to what your players have to say. And, like I say, when those coaches have those player to coach relationships, you're not going to have a great father-son relationship with every player. But, just to give that thought and that, care for them and let them know that you care about them and that you're going to be there for them, no matter what the situation is, it'll give more guys, the ability to open up to more one another. And, you'll have more connection that way. And then you can also build leaders and they can build more trust within the organization or your team or however it goes. But, just that foundation of trying to come together, having that relationship and building that relationship and that bond that you need to have with a coach or anybody who it may be, a leader or mentor, whoever it may be, just having that bond and that leadership ability with them, it'll bring the ability for you to open up with them and have more deeper conversations that you need to have that are normally not talked about. And you can have that at the early age at the high school level too, as at the college level as well. So, just having those tough conversations that needs to be had, we need to make sure, the coaches are open up to, hearing what everybody has to say.
Ronnie, your coach mode is on right now. I need to tell you that. Your coach mode is on right now. I'm feeling it like, whoa, let's get this done. Alvin, what do you think?
I would say what Ronnie said, that is foundational, listening. That's, we have two ears and one mouth for a reason. It starts with listening, but again, that's the first step, to finish it off, back to my question, what are you doing? Because that is really what it's going to come down to. Okay, we listen to different point of views and different experiences that other people face, and from there, how are we changing that narrative? How are we changing that unwanted experience? I mean, in regards, and this applies to athletes, administrations, whoever. Angela Davis say it's not enough to be non-racist. We have to be anti-racist. And racism is one of those things that it's just like a flying gnat. It flies around. You can just be hanging out, but it won't ever go away until you actively kill the mosquito or the gnat. Wherever you're from, South Carolina has some mosquitoes. You have to kill the mosquito to really get rid of the problem. You have to take action to kill it. And
slow down.
Yeah, exactly.
Barbie came up in our last conversation.
Yeah.
In this one. We are on a roll.
Right. So you have to take action, whether
Okay.
and it doesn't have to be the same action. Some people could be more vocal. Some people can just be more behind the scenes doing something work. If your friend says something that's a teammate or whoever, like, hey, that's not, just speak up in that situation. So, whatever you're comfortable in taking action, take that action.
All right, Jay.
Yeah, I think you're going to have to get messy. That's just to your point. There's a lot of discussion going on right now, but then you got to get into it, and you got to have representation at the table and inclusion, right? To talk about these things. And hey, what do y'all think if we do this? Could it be better? Listen, I know there's not everybody on this call is not from Wofford, but if you're not, Wofford's a great place with really, really good people. And there's a lot of people that care deeply about all students here, and especially our Black students. And I think just giving them an opportunity to voice those concerns on campus or what they're going through, and allow them to give some really good ideas. I mean, I've found our Black players have had some really good ideas for us to be involved in. We had the police chief and 6 other officers come and talk to us in a spirited conversation. And it ended with the officers asking our players to ride along with them to see what they go through every day. Whoa. And it just was the most powerful 2 hours in our arena, not bouncing a ball, but like those are things that our players can bring to the table that they want to do, that they want to do on campus for change.
So engaging the community, the Wofford community with the larger community at whole could also be a great way of kind of touching on these topics. They're not playing in a bubble. I've heard as a Wofford bubble, a smaller institution bubble. They're not playing in a bubble. They have a community. So I think you're making a great point on that, Jay. And Kelsey, we're going to end the night with you.
Oh man, pressure's on. I would say, I think everyone touched on it. I think going off of Jay's point, one of my favorite quotes is from Oprah Winfrey: education is the key to unlocking the world, a passport to freedom. It's educating ourselves. It's having those difficult conversations. I think it's one thing to listen, but it's one thing to listen and learn. I think a lot of us are so comfortable having those easy conversations. How was your weekend? How's it going? No, ask about, get more personal, get more deeper, ask about their family lives. Don't be afraid to ask about their first bout with racism. Don't be afraid to ask them the first time they were called the N-word. I just had this conversation last week with some student athletes, because I think from there you can kind of listen and learn. And again, go back to being vulnerable. And I think too, going back to your community point, I'm big on community service, especially in college. I think when you do community service and give back, you learn a lot about, not just about yourself, but the people and communities that you're helping. Expose them to different communities. One of the best things I'll say I did growing up, my parents, I went to Europe and lived there for a summer with a white homestay family that had no electricity. One of the best experiences of my life, because I learned so much about myself and what I could go through and about them. And of course, when you have traveled, you kind of know different parts of the world. I did a piece on Rand, West Virginia, which is where Randy Moss is from. Completely different from the DMV area. Learned a lot about my own stereotypes, my own biases, and quite frankly, vice versa. Working for NASCAR, that's exactly why I did that. Have those difficult conversations, and don't only have them when something bad happens in the news. And also, as much as you can, try to, I like what Jay said, talk with police officers. Not all police officers are bad. Not all people are bad. And I do think there is room for change, which can happen, which, I think whichever way the election goes, I think hopefully change will come. But it's having those difficult conversations, learning from each other, and then giving back to the community. When you learn something, don't just keep that knowledge and information for yourself. We can break the system of racism by pouring it into the younger generation. We're not born racist, people become racist. And I think that's why it's so big in us pouring into that next generation and listening and learning from our young people. I tried to keep us at 8. I'm all done.
Yeah, Kelsey, you got it. You did it. Thank you so much. I want to thank all our panelists. Thank you so much. And now we will take, we won't be taking any questions. We're at our 8 o'clock time, but I want to thank everyone for coming out. I also want to recognize the organizers of these anti-racism sessions, Dr. Jim Neighbors, Dr. Rhiannon Liebrick, a lot of doctors here, Dr. Camille Bethea, Dr. Kim Ronson, Dr. Kimberly Hall, Dr. Tasha Smith-Tyus, Mr. James Stutes, Dean Taifa Alexander, Tiara Woney, and Nadia Glover. Let's give them a round of applause for this wonderful programming. This is our last programming of the year, but keep a lookout. Go and follow at WOCO Diversity for updates and for information on future events. Thank you all for coming out and engaging in this work, and I look forward to seeing you all in the future. Have a wonderful evening.
I stayed on just to say I really enjoyed this series. You all, thank you for doing this. I have really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much.